Today we'll be going over these six stocks that you see at the right-hand side of your screen, going over the technical and fundamental aspects of why I think these tickers have some great potential to move to the upside in the next few days or weeks. So without further ado, I must start by saying that none of what you hear or see today is financial advice. This is purely for educational purposes only. You should always have your own trade plan and never follow anyone blindly. So with that said, let's get right into it. DKNG is the first stock that we are watching today. So DKNG DraftKings has been a source of a lot of news recently. It got two upgrades from two prominent players, all within the $60 target, 60 for Morgan Stanley, as you can see, and 65 for Goldman Sachs. It also had some news release earlier in the week that it is launching its mobile sports betting platform in Virginia. So we see a continual statewide acceptance and trying to think of the word, I guess, initiation of these type of sports betting uh, platforms into the states. So I remember Governor Cuomo, I believe his name is, the New York governor, was talking about how sports betting is going to play an integral part in reinvigorating the economy. So a lot of states are adopting these types of platforms in hopes of making some economic recovery from the coronavirus. So it's got a strong fundamental purpose to consider a buy. But let's break down the technical aspects right away here. So the first indicator I always look for is volume. I like to see big green volume nodes that beat out the counterpart red nodes time and time again. As you can see with DraftKings, there's a lot of accumulation volume throughout this entire pattern. Especially today with that news, we see a huge uptick in volume eclipsing the last couple of weeks of trading here. Another aspect on the volume side of things, you can see this huge volume shelf that's formed in the upper region of this pattern overall, which could act as a nice pocket of support if price breaks out and tries to retest this area before continuing higher. So from the daily chart, we see it's obviously ranging in this triangle pattern here, multiple points of confluence on both the upper and the lower trend lines. So overall, on a daily perspective, the volume and the pattern do indicate a lot of bullishness. Zooming in a little bit here, focusing on the last month of price action, we see a strong impulse move up and what appears to be a bull flag forming. Now, when I see these type of daily setups, I love when a bull flag or some other form, pennant or whatever it may be, forms just below the breakout level. It does show to me a lot of bullish confluence. We can see that with GAMIA. So we were ranging in this price action. We saw an impulse move up, bull flag, and a huge breakout since. So hopefully we can see something similar in DraftKings. Zoom in on the hourly chart. So what I like to see for the breakout is I want to see an hourly trend change to the bulls and then a continuation through that pattern. So before today's price action, DraftKings was in a clear downtrend, lower low and lower high. But then on the release of the upgrade from Goldman Sachs, we saw a huge gap up and bulls bought that strength immediately. You can see that represented in a huge volume node here. So a lot of technical confluence. Now, what are we doing? Okay, so we made a strong impulse move up on the hourly chart. We're making a higher low. What I want to see tomorrow is a break of this pivot high with the same type of volume that we see represented in today's first hour candle. If I can get all of that to align, that will be my sign for an entry. Targets for an entry are going to be derived from this pivot low here to this pivot high here using a Fibonacci tool. So from roughly 31.47 to roughly 64.19, we can see targets ranging in the low mid 70s all the way up to 83. Now the upgrades that the two institutions gave this ticker was 60 and 65. So kind of right around this pivot high here, but I definitely believe the confluence of factors such as volume, like the confluence of technical factors, the pattern, the volume shelf and whatnot, as well as the fundamental aspect when you see those two sides of the coin coincide very nicely together. as you were seeing with DraftKings, it typically will give you a strong run. I do believe we'll get over $60, but again, none of this is financial advice, but my targets are going to be that low mid 70 range. BLNK, as you can see, already breaking out, had this nice, beautiful triangle pattern, seeing tremendous strength in today's candle. So let's start with the fundamental reason. So why are charging stocks solar today? So yeah, BLNK, an electric vehicle charging station, as you can see here. So Joe Biden signed an executive order last night for support for renewable energy, changing the entire federal government fleet of vehicles over to electric vehicles in America. And obviously, they're all going to need chargers. So these EV charging stocks are going to be a hot topic. So that explains the bullishness on BLNK. They're going to have huge application for just the government alone, and that government represents the public because obviously the government's going to sign in laws and legislature that are going to demand or require the public to transfer over to electric vehicle stocks. We can see that represented in California, where Governor, I believe it's Newsom, I'm not very familiar, but he signed, I think, a $1.3 billion deal to convert all transportation over to electric vehicles by 2030. Not entirely factual on that, but I believe I'm paraphrasing. But you get the idea. Move over to electrical vehicles is coming, and charging stations are going to be just as popular as the vehicles themselves, just as necessary as the vehicles themselves, I should say. So let's break it down from a technical perspective. Obviously, we've established that the fundamental aspect of this stock is absolute. So looking at the technical side of things, first thing I look at, volume. We see massive accumulation volume throughout this entire price action history. We've seen two enormous breakouts over the last couple months, and more accumulation throughout that entire process. Today, we see a huge volume node coming into action, as well as a very strong candle that closed well above this breakout range with all these upper wicks of resistance. So we have the daily breakout confirmed. Now we can zoom in on the hourly chart and figure out a trade plan. Okay, so now with a little bit more detail, we see we got a strong impulse move up on the hourly chart, and we are looking for a higher low to add into positions. I have limit orders set just above this pivot high, right around 56.50, I believe it is, ballpark. Now we do see that we have a bit of a pullback already on the hourly chart, and I'm hoping that we can get a deeper retracement. You can check after hours, see how things are going. Yeah, so there you go. Get a little bit of a dump in the after hours session. RSI is very overextended, so it would make sense to see this consolidate a little bit more. And I'm hoping we can get some price targets right around this pivot here. Based off this volume that's coming in, this is a key sign for me. I like to see that hourly chart, so a strong impulse move up, good volume coming in, add on the pullback and see continuation higher. So hopefully all that can align, get a fill with BLNK, but based again on a fundamental and technical aspect, we see these two factors coinciding very nicely together. That adds a lot of fuel to the fire, and upside is the most likely outcome from here. I'll actually skip over VLDR temporarily and go to BEEM. So BEEM is another charging station stock. So I had it drawn out a little bit differently on Twitter, but you can see here we have a beautiful bull pennant. Now we have massive volume coming in here. Do have a bit of a red node as well, but overall bulls in full control, and we incorporate that with the fundamental aspect of these charging stations are becoming more and more prominent, more and more important to the EV sector. Utilizing this type of executive order as fuel to the fire. Now we see also that BEEM announced a record fourth quarter for deliveries of their product in 2020. So we see, again, the incorporation of a fundamental aspect into these trade ideas. This company is doing very well in what was a tumultuous environment with the COVID-19 pandemic, and they excelled. So with the new administration in office, 4 years of renewable energy leniency and support, then we're going to only see upside for these types of companies. So again, looking into a technical perspective, we have that big bull volume node here. Zooming in on the hourly chart, you get a little bit more detail. So we are clearly in an hourly downtrend. See a low, lower high, lower low. Now we have seen a strong bounce. The technical play that I am looking for right now is an hourly trend change to the bulls. So based off the size of this bounce, what I need to see is either a breakout above this pivot high here, add on the retest, and then continuation higher. Or from this bounce, we top out, we pull back, we make a higher low compared to this pivot down here, set on the 25th of January at 56.59. And then we see a breakout over this pocket of resistance, and that would be my cue to enter. As you can see, we are approaching the apex of the pattern, so a breakout will come inevitably very soon. But we'll see what happens. Let's check in after hours. After hours, we have already changed the hourly trend. We can see this low, pivot high, higher low, and break up. So we'll see if that gets any follow through. I do only really trust the chart layout without extended hours. I think the detail is just more refined. So I will like to see a higher low compared to this pivot low, break the interim pivot high. For that hourly trend change, that would signify to me daily breakout is underway. And we can use BLNK as a momentum indicator for us. So if this is going up, you have to assume this appears to be like the leading stock in the entire sector. And you would have to assume that these stocks like BEEM are going to just follow BLNK's lead. But we'll see what happens, waiting for that hourly trend change confirmation. So VLDR is another LiDAR company. These types of companies specialize in autonomous driving. So you see obviously a huge shift to the EV sector. A lot of these EV cars are going to incorporate the autonomous driving. Uber and Lyft are going to change their fleets to autonomous taxi service in the next years. So LiDAR is definitely going to be a prominent figure in the modernization of vehicle technology. So again, looking at the fundamentals. So VLDR is interesting to me because it has a 53.65% short float. Now, these types of short floats are the ones that lead to GME equivalent squeezes or BBBY, these types of squeezes where it's just parabolic. And we are clearly in an environment right now where high short float stocks are going mad. They are exploding left, right, and center. Now, GME was only the result of a bunch of Reddit traders who just kept pushing the price up, scaring shorts, and led to this tremendous short squeeze, or as far as I can decipher from what I've heard so far on the stock. But VLDR has huge application. We can see in its cousin stock, LAZR, that a breakout is underway in this name. As you can see, we made an inside bar here. Great volume overall for the bulls. So this is the type of stock where, similar to the situation with BLNK and BEEM, BLNK is like the parent company or the one that everyone's watching. It's breaking out. LAZR is the same equivalent in the LiDAR sector, and VLDR is set up almost better than LAZR. So based off a technical perspective, we are making a beautiful bull pennant right now, appear to just be breaking out. We have that enormous bull volume behind the stock. And with that short float, I mean, this thing could really get going. Looking in on the daily or on the hourly chart, so we had that hourly trend change, which led to great continuation this morning. We got a gap up open, beautiful bull volume coming in. This is exactly the type of volume I like to see on these hourly setups. Strong impulse move. I added on the dip. I got a fill right at 24.30, so I got an excellent fill, and we're already bouncing. We can see an uptick in volume over the 14.30 candle. That was set right here. So I mean, this thing is poised and looks really well situated for a continuation higher. So we'll have to just keep an eye on LAZR. I do have exposure in both position in LAZR. I'm taking a smaller position in VLDR just because, well, I prefer the parent company. I prefer LAZR over VLDR just from a company outlook perspective. But with that being said, the short flow that we see at 53% is, I can't ignore that, and I will take the risk any day of the week just to try to capitalize on what this market sentiment is providing us. So looking for targets, we'll take it from this pivot low down here to the pivot high. And what do we see? We see high 30s for a potential target, all the way up to 40s. Now, who knows where this could go? We also have this conflicting trend line right here where it might act as a bit of resistance. So we could see a potential move upwards to this $30 range, which would make sense. That's psychological if we get a strong couple days here, but hopefully we see a breakout of that, continuation up to the mid 30s. And I think it's very doable considering the short flow. Next one is CBAT. So CBAT is another energy company. They specialize in, I believe it's batteries. There wasn't too much news on this guy, but they do have a high short float of 15%. So it's a Chinese company. I believe it was battery technology is the fundamental part of this stock. So again, we see in the renewable energy sector, batteries being very prominent. China is obviously going to be a leader in the international EV space, but it has such a great technical outlook that I can't really ignore it. So we have, again, look at this technicals, right? We have the massive accumulation of volume throughout this entire consolidation phase. And we are in this broad pennant right here, making exceptional daily uptrend, technicals, high, higher, low, and so forth. So it appears that we broke out of this consolidation here, made a higher high and are just making a higher low. So we zoom in on the hourly chart, and just to get a better view of what we see. So we see the strong hourly impulse, and then it appears that we are making an equilibrium that hopefully will break to the upside. I can see that we have this clear trend line down here. So I'm hoping that we can see a break this hourly pennant tomorrow and potentially see a lot more continuation out of this name. Again, it's just, I didn't really look too much into the fundamentals. I think it's not I don't think it's necessary all the time, whatever trade you're taking, to look into the fundamentals. It's obviously advised. I want to stack as much as I possibly can, but once you get into the renewable energy space as a battery manufacturer, producer, or whatnot, and then you just look at this volume, I mean, like 160 million shares traded here, 100 million shares, like 170 million shares traded in these last two sessions back in November. It's just crazy the amount of institutional interest in this type of name. And with a 15% shortfall, that can definitely get moving as well. So we'll look to see the break of that hourly pennant. And the last stock today is Zoom. So we have this beautiful descending pattern here that appears to be forming a bull flag just outside of the space. So Zoom, obviously, we're all familiar with the fundamental aspect of Zoom. Video calling has been a dominant force in the international community since the pandemic. And its application has now become something that's almost embedded in a lot of business and school way of life, right? In the business and school culture. So there's going to be a lot more video chatting, a lot more conference calls, a lot more online learning into the future, whether we like it or not. And Zoom is set up right now in such a technical aspect that you incorporate that fundamental sentiment and shift in public perception of such a company as Zoom, that it makes sense that an upside move is going to happen. So we see, based on the technical side of things, we see good volume accumulation over the last several months. We have been in this downtrending pattern for a while. We have multiple points of confluence here on both the upper and the lower trend line. And so now we see a strong impulse move up, and it appears that we are making a daily bull flag. So for this stock, zooming in on the hourly chart is one of the better ideas that we can have. So we have a clear hourly uptrend here, then we lose it here, we regain it here, lose it again. So we're kind of all over the place on the hourly chart. So what I want to see is that strong impulse wave, a higher low compared to the pivot low, wherever it is bought back up, and then we see continuation over that pivot high. wherever it tops out to confirm the hourly bounce or the daily bounce and the hourly trend change. Or we can just look on the daily chart, see this pivot high set on January 15th of 404.44. If we get a strong break above that on the hourly chart, that could be our cue to enter. So I hope you all enjoyed the video today. Had a good day trading, and I will talk to you tomorrow.